Have you ever closed your phone and felt mentally thinner than before you opened it? Not physically tired, just scattered. Have you ever tried to sit still and felt restless within seconds? Or worse, felt nothing? Your brain isn't weak, it's saturated. We're living in the most cognitively dense environment in human history. And while technology has expanded our access to information, it has quietly reduced our tolerance for stillness. This episode is about quitting your phone. It's about understanding what constant input is doing to your nervous system, your attention, and your capacity for consciousness. Hello and welcome to the new Ashla podcast. My name is Michael Perry and I'm joined today by Justin Gates. Today we're diving into digital overload, something that is becoming an epidemic more and more. And I think many people had no idea this was even a thing. You know, as new things come around, we don't really see the consequences of that technology until enough time has gone by and things start to come up and start to be evaluated. But I think everyone's starting to feel this. This is becoming talked about more and more in social circles, in the media, and awareness is growing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it is because we're all connected. We're all attached. It's really hard to see it, though, as we'll get into today. It kind of sneaks up on you quietly, you know. And it's not just phones. It's, you know, the Xbox and the PlayStation and computer games and
Netflix
and so it's literally on every screen. Every single screen that exists in our lives now has the ability to steal our attention away. So
yeah.
Well,
and I think a big part of it is it just becomes so normalized. We have these spaces where nothing's going on. You know, we get caught into the humdrum of just day in, go to work, come home, hang out until you got to go to bed, and we get into these routines and we start to fill that space with whatever can take our attention because, let's face it, it's a lot easier to be distracted than it is to be alone with ourselves.
Yeah. And attention is not neutral, as we'll get into, right? We don't think about it as we kind of think about attention wherever we put it, and that it doesn't have an action behind it, but it's not neutral. Where you place your attention is what starts to become around you and within you, right?
Yeah. It's like the old saying, where attention flows, energy goes.
Exactly. Yeah. Where we put it shapes the very reality around us. And when we get lost in this stuff, we get lost in the screens, lost in the Facebooks, and lost in the video games and whatever. We get lost. We truly do get lost in those. When we allow our attention to just go away, it does steal from us without us even knowing it. Right.
Well, it's like the dawn of shorts, man. Like, I think that was one of the most detrimental things to happen to society. I mean, neuroscience shows that attention shapes neural wiring. And the more frequently you're switching between things, the more your mind adapts to novelty-seeking patterns, you know? It's that constant chase of dopamine and information.
Yeah. Attention literally shapes the wiring of the brain. And it affects us in a spiritual way, too. And physically, even. We start getting bad postures, right? When you're sitting there looking at a phone all day.
Oh my God, ain't that the truth?
It affects every part of us, not just our brains, right? So what we repeatedly focus on becomes, you know, and this can be an obvious statement, becomes familiar. But what becomes familiar becomes automatic, right? And what becomes automatic does what? It starts to define everything.
It becomes who we are, yeah.
Yeah, and it interrupts our sleeping patterns. It interrupts our relationships, our work stuff. So, yeah, no, it does. It does literally shape everything around us. That's what our attention is for. It's why we talk a lot about awareness in this season, right? And consciousness, because these are necessary components on the path to self-mastery.
Yeah. You know, I think one of the big things people get stuck on who are in this healing scene, I know I was guilty of this and still am from time to time, is it's like we will read a good book, we will get all this great information, then we go on to the next one. You know, we digest this content, then it's on to the next one, and before you know it, you remember maybe 6 sentences out of the book that maybe struck you pretty good, but you lose a lot of that core integration that could happen. You know, one thing I hate with shorts is it's like I'll see something, this little 15-minute skit that has, or 15-second skit that's like hits home. It's like, oh my God, there is so much truth to that. Instead of pausing, reflecting, it's on to the next video and on to the next video. And all of a sudden, it's out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah. Right. How important is it for us to take a look at how often we're constantly switching tasks? You talked about short videos, but like if you go from like a message to to a notification, or from a video to an email or whatever, I guess the question is, how important is it for us to look at these things in the kind of the larger picture of this attempt to detox from the digital stuff? Because these switches are really small, but they start to put a pattern in our brain, right? In our awareness.
I think one of the big issues is we end up getting into multitasking, right? I mean, it's just a part of life. You know, we're trying to listen to a book while we're cleaning the house and being effective. And for me, it's like, I enjoy that. But it's like, if you're listening to something you need to digest, right, you're going to miss most of the important details. There's research that's even come out of Stanford that talks about how attention, when we try to multitask, our brains struggle to filter the information we're taking in on what's good and what's bad information, and can dilute so much of the good bits we need to comprehend.
Right. But what it also does, it trains us to not want to be still. It trains us to make it difficult for us to have that center spot, that peace, that stillness, right? Because we're just training our brains to expect stimulation constantly, nonstop.
Yeah.
Right? And as you said, we become accustomed to these bursts of new information all the time. And when those things stop, we don't feel calm. Like you might think, well, once they'll stop, then it's time to chill out. But we don't. We start to feel more restless and very uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
Almost like silence really starts to feel like we're being deprived of something.
There's a book that came out. It's an amazing book. I think it was called The Anxious Generation. And it talks about how, like, kids who were introduced to YouTube and all these things at a young age are going into schools and have all this extreme anxiety because they never learned how to regulate their nervous system, because that's why this becomes so addictive, is because we end up using these distractions as a form of regulation.
Right.
Crap, I look at my childhood and it's like, again, I was sort of the lost child. I kept to myself. I was playing games, watching movies, doing whatever I could to distract myself from reality. And it carried over into my adult life, where it was very hard to transition because I had so many coping mechanisms and never learned how to actually deal with my emotions.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and because you lose depth, you lose that ability to look a little deeper on the things that are coming and going in your life, right? And the stuff that's happening inside of you. It's not like we're taught very well at a young age to do that stuff anyway. But even when we understand it, we start to get insight, then it still becomes difficult, because when our attention is constantly fragmented, so will be our awareness, right?
Yeah.
And when this is scattered across tons of small little tiny inputs, we find it very difficult to stabilize, even for a minute, even for a few seconds sometimes. And when our consciousness can't stabilize, well, then everything else suffers. You definitely can't look deeply into things. You definitely can't reflect, because reflection requires space, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, percent. I mean, again, it's like, if you're feeling called out listening to this is something we all suffer with. It's just about being mindful when it starts to do it.
I was doing it this morning. I got up, I was drinking my water, and I was 45 minutes past, and I was watching reels on Facebook. It happens to all of us, and I think we're really calling ourselves out and everyone else, right? So
it's one of the biggest reasons I want to do this episode. You know me. I am so good about, like, with social media, if I'm spending too much time on it, I delete it. And the last couple months, I don't know if it's just the anxiety and all the things I'm juggling right now, but I have been sucked into such a hole of constantly consuming media and not giving myself enough time to just exist, which I think is what, in the end, we're all running from, right? It's that being bored, which is one of the healthiest things you can have. Being bored is not a bad thing. It's just uncomfortable.
and and maybe we could do a show on this at some point because boredom really leads to lots of things, right? It leads to, in my life in the past, I would smoke more cigarettes when I used to smoke. I would smoke more cigarettes when I was bored. I would I would eat more snacks when I was bored. I was doing all these things that these little things that added up, not good for me, right? In the long run. Boredom is boredom is a tough one to conquer these days because again, we're so used to instant information, instant gratification, instant this, instant that, and yeah, they're little things, but they do stack up, right? They do stack up pretty badly.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because even though our main focus today is digital overload,
Hmm.
this whole compulsion to stay busy is hardwired into us. And at a young age. I mean, you grow up, you're involved in school, you got all this homework.
Hmm.
Some of us were lucky enough to have a childhood that we had to go outside, which gave us the capacity for doing a lot of things, but
Right.
it's we live in an age where people stay in and screens are abundant and
Right.
distractions are abundant. And I think, like you said, I mean, I was guilty of that. Like, I'm thankful I quit smoking, but man, there were days I would go through a pack a day just because I had nothing else to do.
It's
It'd
just
be
bored.
that and scrolling on my phone.
Right. It was just because we're bored. You know.
Yeah.
I've really had to. I really had to narrow down. I had to clamp down on that. Um, the snacking and the smoking back then was really tough for me to do because I was finding myself being bored. And you know, once you do a lot of meditation practices, a lot of mindfulness practices and stuff, and they become part of your day or part of your life, really, you don't feel bored doing those things. But in the moments you're not doing those things, sometimes you feel bored, right? Even though you're being
Yeah.
still and and we all get caught up in this where we have to constantly be thinking or moving or doing something. Yeah, it happens to me a lot, even now. And
Yeah.
I have to catch it, and then I have to make sure that okay, I'm just going to sit here for a minute, at least a minute or five, and do nothing. All right, do
Yeah.
nothing. Boredom is good for us if we approach it the right way. That's probably why we should do it. We should do a show on that soon because boredom is good for us, right?
Yeah. I'd be up for that.
If
I think that'd be a great
if
episode.
we if we approach it in the proper way, because boredom is not good for us when we're filling the time with stuff that isn't good for us and trying to avoid being bored. But anyways,
I would love to see a study of how many of the greatest ideas came from when people were bored and just contemplating.
right.
Because I'll bet you it's a high percentage.
Yeah, yeah. Um, a lot of inventors and some of the greatest minds that we've ever known, usually got their breakthroughs while taking a nap,
Yeah.
or laying on the couch, and just staring at the ceiling, right? I mean, it's documented. We know this. So I think the best ideas happen there. But yeah. Anyways,
Yeah. I think one important thing for you, the listener, to really reflect on is just ask yourself, when was the last time you engaged deeply with something and then allowed yourself to sit with that idea without checking something else out? I think it's a great way to gauge, like, am I being intentional with the content I'm digesting or am I using it as a distraction?
yeah. I'll tell you. I'll give you another good example. When I'm editing a show, or when I'm editing shorts, or when I'm writing show notes, or when I'm working on the book, if in those small moments, right, in between where it uploads, and you edit the shows too, so you understand what I'm saying. There's sometimes 45 seconds or 3 minutes or whatever, however long it takes for the edit to
Yeah.
upload and for it to do all that stuff. And I will not sit there and watch that. I will not sit there. I'll go to Facebook. I'll go to TikTok. I'll go check all of our other stuff that we have
Oh,
going
yeah.
on, right?
Guilty.
I do it all the time, and then, but sometimes I'll get something on another whole nother platform on a whole nother activity hooks me, and then I and then I realize it's
An
been
hour
5 or 10
later.
minutes, and then I have to go. Oh damn! Finish what you're working on, and then I'll have to go and close all the stuff, and I really have to push myself to, okay, edit the show in Riverside, and do not leave there until it's done. Okay, check the Facebook page, upload the stuff to the Facebook page, whatever I have to do there, right? Don't do anything else, and then close that window, and then onto YouTube or whatever. Because if I don't, man, it will take me 16 hours to get anything done because I get bored with this doing this, taking its sweet ass time, and then I have to go do something else because I don't, you know what I mean? It's just horrible, all right? It's just horrible sometimes. So.
No, and I do it as well. When I was doing videos in 4K for a while there, trying to export them like that, even though I realized our cameras don't even have that right now going, at least mine doesn't. And it would take 25 minutes to export. And that 25 minutes was definitely more than enough time for me to get derailed on a whole different tangent. And come back to like, I got to get this done.
Right.
So let's jump into like the chemical mechanisms here. Because I think an important part of why this is such an epidemic in society is the dopamine effect. Mm-hmm. It's the way our brains are just wired to constantly chase things that give us pleasure.
Yeah. And it happens so often to us. It drives those habits because it's very subtle, but it happens. I mean, it happens so frequently. And this is what shapes our behavior towards it. It's part of it, right? Now, we have to kind of explain dopamine, and I'll try to keep it simple, but it's less of a chemical of pleasure, but more of a chemical of anticipation, right? And I would say it prepares the brain to be ready and happy to see what's coming next. So that's why the notifications start triggering that. That's why the text messages, and then the DMs, and then so-and-so posted a short, and then you go see that. And although these things are good for content creators like us, over time, it's really poor for us as humans, right? Because then we get addicted to it because it feels good.
Dopamine is a part of our neurology because it's meant to help us seek things that bring us joy. Right. And we look at society nowadays, and people are losing a sense of purpose, a sense of fulfillment, a sense of joy. And when you're constantly feeding dopamine loops, your mind starts to have this, it starts creating more and more of a gap of how much dopamine it needs to give you pleasure. Right. And so now simple things that would give you joy, going out in nature, spending time with friends, don't give you that same high that it would otherwise. I mean, that's why drugs are so addictive, is because they trigger dopamine.
Yeah. Because something new is available at every second, at every turn, and then we start dealing with being afraid of missing something, right? The whole fear of missing out, right? A lot of people I know have that because they're waiting for that next interesting thing to come or something important to come. But then over time, our brain begins to expect things that are novel, right?
Yeah,
and it becomes constantly, right? We just need something new over and over, something that is more interesting and more interesting and more interesting. And as you said, it gets more difficult for the brain to give us that. Sometimes we go into some weird places to find it, which we won't get into, but
that's a very good point, because that is one of the issues. Again, as you feed that dopamine more and more, it takes more and more dopamine to do it. So yeah, people start going into, you look at dark humor, you get on Reddit, you see a lot of that crazy crap on Reddit, and a lot of that is because people need that much more crazy stuff to feel that sense of excitement.
I was having a conversation yesterday, in fact, about why people are into some really weird stuff. And because I like to keep this show under the rated R, I won't really get into that. But I think those of you out there who are adults and understand what I'm saying, we get stuck in that. And then the next thing, we're watching something more weird and more weird. And I don't mean weird as in judgy. I'm not trying to judge anybody. But we have to up the ante every time, right? Because this stuff stops working. It stops bringing us that hit, right? So then we go something stronger, something more interesting or weird. And then by the time we get to up here, it's like it's gotten really bizarre, and it's gotten us so far away from the thing that we were looking for pleasure from that we don't even recognize it anymore. We don't even recognize what we're into anymore. And yes, use your imaginations. I think most of you know what I'm talking about. But I'm not going to talk about it because I don't want to get the show I don't want to get a flicked in the forehead. But anyways, that's a really easy example because I see that a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
and this type of chase, this chase that we do, we have to up the ante so many times that it crosses into some really really scary places for people, places where victims are created, if you understand what I mean. So because that baseline stimulation has to keep going up, right? It can't stay the same because the brain gets used to it, and then it has to go, okay, well, it's not even affecting this guy anymore. We got to up the ante. So find something worse and worse and worse and worse and worse.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, like addiction, right? They talk about people who
Mm-hmm.
do these hard drugs and they're always chasing that first high. It's because
Mm-hmm.
they get like, I know meth is something that I've done a lot of research into, and the amount of dopamine that
You were
creates.
going to say meth is something I've done a lot of.
How do you think I keep up with everything?
I know, I know.
But it's
Don't
like the amount of
don't do
dopamine that
meth, kids. Drugs are bad. Don't do meth.
drugs are bad, okay?
Okay, okay.
But the amount of dopamine you get that first hit, you'll always be chasing that because you're never going to get that type of sensation again. And that's why you get into harder and harder drugs. And it's this vicious cycle.
Right.
Now, one important thing I think we need to touch on too, that I didn't think to put into the notes, but it's so important when it comes to the digital overload, is algorithms. Algorithms are designed to hit all these emotions. You see happy puppies, then you see a bomb going off, then you see people protesting, then you see kittens, and then you see babies, and then you see another bomb, and it's like, holy crap. It is meant to keep you engaged. I heard a quote the other day that is going to stick with me for life, and it's like anything that is free, all right, free games, YouTube, anytime something is free, you are the product.
Mm-hmm. Yes. No, we are the product. We are the product. You remember that story in that really old book where the two people were created and then the snake came around and
Oh, I think I know what book you're talking about.
I can't remember what it's called, but you know the story, right? But that snake, that's what an algorithm is. The algorithm is a snake. And again, this is something that us as content creators benefit from. I mean, you and I aren't driving Lamborghinis or anything, so I don't know how you can.
Well, I think content creators are. I think that's why we're not why we have to work so hard to get our numbers.
Right.
Is we're not selling dopamine hits. We're not selling triggers. We're not selling rage bait.
Right. So I mean, people on this side of it do benefit from those things. We're still riding bikes and they're driving Lambos, and as you said, there's probably a reason for that, but yeah, but the algorithm, we are the product, and the algorithm is a master at getting us to buy in on it, right?
And as you start getting into this habit, as you start getting more and more where you're trying to consume content and distract yourself, the baseline rises like we're talking about, and the tolerance for stillness becomes more and more difficult. Boredom starts feeling threatening, and silence begins feeling really uncomfortable. And it's important to be aware of this because when you start realizing that you're reaching for things constantly to keep yourself distracted, and again, I'm guilty of this. Again, I wanted to do this episode because I'm catching myself going down this rabbit hole.
Right.
But the nervous system forgets how to downshift.
Yeah. If at all. At some point, it becomes, it almost feels impossible to relax. Like we forget what relaxation is. This is why we really hit hard on how important rest is, right? Because and rest isn't just kicking back on the couch and looking at more shorts. It's like allow yourself to do nothing. Just sit there and contemplate about things that bring you joy. But the constant need to do something, the moment that disappears, and I've seen this in my kids too. Right, my youngest kids will be considered like the iPad babies. You know what I mean? There were screens everywhere by the time they were born. But we find a level of restlessness that almost feels impossible to overcome at some point, right? Because because we have to search for something. We got to do something, and we got to take our attention away from this moment of boredom and into something that's novel, that's new, that's fresh and exciting.
Yeah.
So, like I said, yeah, you have this impulse that really drives us hard too, to reach for a different device or open another tab or check whatever.
Yeah. Well, and I think the worst part is like you reaching for this because you're not, it's not even because you enjoy it anymore. It's because your baseline
Right.
has shifted. Any type of stillness makes your system feel so agitated.
Yeah. Right. You do get agitated because you have to find something more and more and more and more. And weird, more weird and more weird, or more dangerous or whatever the thing is. Like you see this in adrenaline junkies. Yeah, they start off climbing trees, man, but then they start jumping off of stuff.
Yeah.
Because once you do the thing, it's like, I got to top that. I got to top that. And eventually, they get in a spacesuit like that crazy Red Bull guy who jumped off of space. Remember that guy that jumped out of space not too long ago? You ever seen that dude?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Nuts.
Crazy.
To me, that seems absolutely nuts, but I don't chase adrenaline, so I want to make it to 80 at least. So I don't chase adrenaline, but
Well, I had a phase of my life where I was like that. It's like I started hiking, then I started climbing mountains, then I started doing boulder jumping, and then I started like I really want to go skydiving. Even now, I got that itch to go skydiving. But it's just you start like what's going to make me feel more and more exciting? Spelunking in caves. Like why the hell did I do that?
Well, and again, none of those things are bad. Everyone, calm down. None of those things are bad, but that's just kind of a good way of another way of looking at what we're talking about. Because if you've ridden the scariest roller coasters on the planet that exist, any other roller coaster underneath that, right, is not gonna be as exciting. It might still be fun, but it's not gonna feel exciting, right? Like the big ones did.
Well, then even like another area to look at this is an attachment, right? One of the reasons people keep jumping to bad relationships is because the amount of intense emotions they feel when they actually get into something healthy, it's so calm and still that it feels unnatural. And they crave that excitement they once felt. And that's what leads people back into these horrible situations.
Yeah, 100% true.
So I think another important thing to touch on is like when we start getting into this habit, you start feeling scattered and then you start feeling numb, and it's there's so much going on within you that you don't see, but you feel it.
Right. We talk a lot about unfolding and about small things creating larger things. And that's because that's how life is, for the good things but also for the things that are bad for us, right?
All things in moderation.
That's right. Well, that's the antidote to stuff, but it's important to remember that even though we teach a path and we teach in a way that it is an unfolding, a progression. I didn't give you everything at once and then said, okay, now you're blessed or whatever. Now you know everything, right? I didn't flick your ghost out of your body and now you know everything, right? It happened in an unfolding. And this is why we never put timelines on things. Someone might progress very quickly because they're just wired that way, or some people might take 3 times as long. There's no judgment in that because we all progress as we need to, as we should. But this happens to the stuff that's not good for us either. Like this stuff, this digital overload doesn't appear all at once. It develops little by little, and but it also follows an unfolding and a progression, right? Because it creates habits, and then once we're starting to actually experience it, it's been happening for a long time already, right? So the first stage is what? Overstimulation, right?
Yeah. It's just constantly keeping our nervous system active, keeping engaged. And again, the algorithms are great at knowing exactly what buttons to hit to keep you engaged with it.
Right. Right. Because we just have to have that constant, nonstop flow of input. Messages and videos and articles and headlines and rage-baiting news notifications and titles that we have people that never really comment on our stuff, right? On our shows or on the things I post, except when the headline grabs their attention.
Yep.
And they will go on this big long tangent about something that we didn't even freaking talk about.
Yeah.
Not even talked about it at all, right? They just read a headline on one of the shows or read one of the show titles and got mad, got angry or upset or even overly joyful about it, but never even listened to not one single second of the show. And But that's what we've created in ourselves. And this goes back to reacting versus responding. That's always a theme in everything we do, right? We're trying to learn how to respond, not react. And when we get overloaded constantly and constantly and constantly all the time, that's what happens. We just react to things that aren't even there to be reacted to, instead of responding to what we should be responding to, or looking at a headline that pisses us off and saying, you know what, I don't think I'm going to read that today, or I think I'm not going to listen to that today because it might make me angry or whatever. And that's fine too. But at least you're choosing, you're responding. But this constant activity that we have to bring to ourselves, it tricks us into thinking that we're really enjoying it, or that we're really engaged, or that we're really energized. There's movement there, and there's activity there, but we were not designed to process that much stuff at such a continuous, fast pace, right?
No. It's one of the issues with like right now, we live in such a crazy time in the world. And it's just like you see all these crazy things come out and people forget about them. Why? Because there's so much that we end up compartmentalizing everything as it's happening.
Right. Yeah. And again, when we're so scattered and so fragmented, we start to feel a really bad fatigue cognitively, right? And it's very difficult to describe that. You know, it's not even just simply like mental fog or anything, because those could be physical issues, right? Not sleeping or not eating good or whatever. But the thing is, your brain is working harder, but we're not accomplishing much depth at all. We're just skimming the surface on everything, and this can lead to bad spiritual practices. This can lead to bad school practices,
bad life
bad
practices.
Good life, yeah. When you're constantly processing stuff without actually going deep enough to understand anything that you're taking in, what good does that do? That's insight without integration. You can never integrate anything that way.
Well, and it's just so when you're scrolling, you're getting all these dopamine hits. Your attention's getting shorter and shorter for the spaces you need these hits. When it starts carrying over into life, your attention starts getting scattered everywhere. You start struggling focusing on things that take attention. Mm-hmm. You know, you start getting restless when you need to be still. And I'm talking about things like, you know, you're in a work meeting, you start spacing out. You start dissociating from different things going on in life, whether it's family activities or trying to go to sleep, you know?
Yeah, there's an axiom of light that really touches upon this. And it talks about taking advantage of these breaks, these lulls, right? Because that's when we can get the best work done, the best inner work done, is when we can stop for even 5 or 10 minutes and really just contemplate and sit in that, right? But we can never do that when we're constantly looking for the next screen. And again, screens aren't going anywhere, right? In fact, we're probably going to have twice as many screens a year from now, and then it's just going to keep doubling. We're going to have screens literally everywhere.
Till the point we're living in one.
Yeah, I stayed at a hotel that had a TV in the bathroom, like in the shower, right? I couldn't understand that. I was like, why is there a TV in here? You know, people are going to end up wasting like 500 gallons of water every time they take a shower. They're going to run the hot water out of this place. I don't get it, but some people do, I guess. They just can't not be connected.
Yeah. I mean, we look at these AR glasses that are coming out. When the Apple Vision came out, I was so fascinated. I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. And I actually went out and got one of those Meta Quests, the 3s that have like the cameras on it. So it's like,
I do love my
I
VR.
can watch VR, and with the cameras on it, you can I can sit on the couch with Allison, see what's going on in the room, put my own screen on the wall, have my own feeds going on over here. And it's like, the minute I got it and I did it for the first day, I'm like, I'm not going to do this. This is dangerous. Like, I need to make sure I am either intentional about when I do use it or not do it at all, because this is a black hole that could suck me in like that. And who wants to look at someone with one of those glasses on all the time? So
yeah, I use mine for Beat Saber. I love Beat Saber.
That's such a great game.
You'll never beat me in Beat Saber, though. I'm a master.
You must be one flexible mother trucker, man, because I can play that game. But once I get to that expert level, dodging all those walls and crap, man, count me out.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we have to be intentional with everything we do. That's the whole point of practicing awareness and, right, taking charge of our lives at every level as much as we can to manage things, manage our emotions, manage our thoughts, manage our time and energy. Because if we don't, what happens, right?
Well, I think one important thing to go on with this is like as you get this, as you start getting scattered and you start struggling with the focusing, you again, these feeds are meant to trigger your emotions, and we are not meant to experience all the emotions within 10 minutes. That is just not how we're wired. And we get into emotional fatigue, and that's when the numbness really starts settling in.
Right.
Because we start just getting drained emotionally and tuned out of the world. We're no longer showing up in life with that excitement because we're just numb.
Yeah. Well, our bodies bypass it because it requires a lot of bandwidth, right? It requires energy to feel things truly, and our brain and our mind and our body will just kind of bypass it, just kind of touch on the surface of it and move along because we need to conserve energy. We need to make sure that we have some stuff in the reserves, right? So, of course, you're going to get numb because you're not going to be able to feel anything deeply, right?
Yeah. And honestly, the numbness, it's a protection mechanism.
It is.
It is our body's way of being like, this, you're destroying yourself right now. Let's just zone you out so you're safe.
Right. Yeah, right. Because we may not feel like we're being overloaded, but our brain and our nervous system does, right?
Yeah. It wants to prevent overwhelm.
Well, yeah, yeah, right. But again, it creeps in slowly and subtly. Because look, the dulling of our emotional processing, it allows us to keep functioning, as you said. Allows us to keep functioning, but at what cost? Well, what's the cost of that?
We do this because we want to be mentally busy.
Yeah.
When we start getting to this numb state and we're trying to be emotionally busy, it's because we're trying to avoid the sensation of numbness,
Yeah.
the helplessness that even comes with it.
Right. Yeah, like I have a rule for myself. I like to watch funny things. Sometimes those things are, created, and sometimes it's just real life videos I'm watching. And if something funny happens and I'm not laughing, then it's time to go. It's time to go do something else. And that's how I do it, right? Because
That's a good gauge.
I look, I can laugh at anything. And because of the work I've done over the last, 25 years, I've developed quite the interesting sense of humor too. So I can I can laugh at anything. And when I stop laughing, for me, it's like, okay, because my algorithm knows to show me funny things. That's what I like to see. So when I stop laughing, nope, I put the phone down. And hell, even these days, I have trouble remembering where I put my phone anymore, right? So, or like when your eyes start getting kind of twitchy, it's like, nope, can't stare at that anymore. Like I won't even let myself use my glasses when I'm reading the phone, because if I don't, then I'll be there forever. So,
Well, I think not only is that a good go by, but the issue is, again, when we start getting to this flatness that comes honestly quicker than we realize.
yeah.
It's because we're oversaturated, and it creates this under engagement with the world around us.
hmm Yeah. Like Heather and I, we oftentimes will not. We have a cutoff time for our, before we go to bed, because if we're constantly looking at screens and stuff, and really going through it, then it's hard to sleep, right? It's hard to rest. It's hard to shut our brain down. I'd be interested in seeing, and there's probably no way to do this because they would have had to done this before this really intense digital age. But I would really be curious to know how dreaming has been affected by all this stuff, right? Like,
Ooh, I wonder. That's a good question.
right, because usually, I remember as a kid, I couldn't wait to go to sleep because then I could dream, right? I love dreaming, but I wonder if kids, young adults, or even us old guys that have gotten hooked on the algorithm, right? I wonder how that's affected our dreams. I'd be interested to know that.
You should do some digging after this. Let me know what you find, because that is a great question.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because dreaming is where we really do a lot of work, and we do it in a way that kind of bypasses our resistance to it. Dreams are good for that.
So let's talk about the rest aspect. So we were mentioning earlier about taking time to be bored and
Right.
what that would look like, what that would require, and why it's so difficult.
Yeah. Well, and I know we'll get into some ways here in a little bit, but we really got to be conscious of how much stuff we're inputting and how often and how long. If you're in there sitting on the pot, right, and you're scrolling through TikTok and you can't feel your legs anymore, it's time to get up, right?
Yeah.
That seems like an obvious one, but many of us don't. We'll go in there until our legs fall off, right?
Yep.
Because the videos are way more interesting than our legs falling asleep. But yeah, I mean, and we talked about this in the show on rest that we did in season 1. But a lot of us believe that we are resting when we stop working, or when we stop doing what we would call work. And you brought it up that we'll sit in front of TV and binge watch a season on Netflix, or we'll just keep scrolling or whatever. And to us, we call that rest, right? We call that relaxation, because I'm just chilling on the couch, man. I'm just chilling on the couch. I'm not working my job.
This is self-care, man.
Right? Self-care, right? This is self-care. Yeah, you're sitting down or you're laying down or you're chilling, and yeah, it might be quiet around you and everything might be chill around you and peaceful and quiet, but this is still doing what? This is just going bananas, because really this true rest, what we call true rest, requires lots of different things that not only looks like rest, but where our bodies are actually settling and beginning the recovery process, right?
Yeah.
And the first thing to that is just sit bored, right? I know it sounds weird.
Yeah.
Sit bored. Reduce that input that's been coming in it all day.
Yeah. Well, and I think a big part is, we talk about emotions and how they store in the body. You don't need a bunch of big things to happen for you to feel a bunch of emotions. Right. And when you're constantly distracting, you're just bottling and bottling and bottling. And this causes you to be in a constant state of having your sympathetic nervous system activated. Mm-hmm. And when that's activated, that does damage on it releases adrenaline, cortisol, all these things that are detrimental to the body. And it doesn't give yourself space for your parasympathetic nervous system to activate and start tending to your body and your mind. People in India, there was a book I read, one of the first spiritual books I read, The 7 Spiritual Laws. And it's one of my favorite books. It's very easy to read. I highly recommend it to anyone. And one of the chapters is about stillness and how one of their practices is you got to spend like a weekend with nothing. No music, no distractions, stillness. Allow your mind to spit up all the stuff it's been compartmentalizing so that you can refresh yourself, so that you can get back to baseline.
Yeah, and then allow those things to resolve. Allow them to close. How many times have you yourself, or you've heard those around you, just suddenly blurt out something they forgot to do at work 3 days ago, right? And it's not that they just plugged in and remembered. They had been thinking about it in the background that whole time, right?
Yep.
So
they just piled a bunch of stuff on it.
Right. It just got lost in all the other stuff. But these kind of cognitive loops must be allowed to close, because we do open up these small little loops. And like you said, they could be questions or tasks or something, some thought that was unfinished because we got distracted or we got interrupted. Unresolved emotions, stuff that we were feeling but didn't take care of. And we have to learn to focus our attention and stay with something long enough so that it
Yeah. You'd be amazed how much irritability can manifest in your being if you don't tend to if you go years without allowing yourself to tend to this stuff. Little things pile up and you can become a mess.
Right. Because our bodies and our minds need time to recover. You don't have to be a track star to need muscle recovery, or to allow your heart rate to slow down and to breathe deeply. Right?
Yeah.
We need to do this so that our total system, our entire system, moves out of this alert mode and then into recovery. because that's how we get sick. That's how all these bad things happen to us. You know, look at the guy that you know who's always constantly getting a cold, even though it's in the middle of summer. But he's the guy that's constantly running on fumes, never taking time to stop, right? So it affects us on every level because we must learn to rest on every level.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like, man, how many people nowadays, especially you listening, I'm guilty of this too, suffer with ADHD, right? Like, there's a part of that can come from genetics, your childhood, but a lot of ADHD we see in the wild nowadays comes from people that have just lost their attention spans because they're so busy digesting that they've lost the ability to be present.
Right. Yeah. I wouldn't argue that. And even if they don't have, because now that it's easier to spot. Now you have these new camps of people open up and say, well, I have real ADHD. That's not real ADHD, but whatever that means, but it's certainly, if it's not real ADHD or whatever, it's certainly something that we learn.
Yeah. And it definitely is ADHD. I'm not saying they're falsely diagnosed.
No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying there's a whole camp out there that would be offended by you.
Oh, yeah. I know.
Those people they're just faking. They're just faking it. They were born with a screen in their hand, and they don't know how to deal with stuff without it.
Yeah. Well, and again, we've grown up in such a culture that has pushed distraction as what the norm is. How many of us grew up in front of a TV screen or an iPad or a computer or in front of some distraction? I remember when I was 4 years old or 5 years old, my parents gave me a Game Boy. You're talking about posture earlier. I got a horrible back that I have been working diligently for years to try to correct. And I know it came from this all the time. I was always in front of a screen.
God, it makes my neck hurt just thinking about it.
Yep.
Oh, now you got to make me stretch. Yeah. I mean, the thing we have to remember is that even though it doesn't feel like our bodies and our minds are constantly racing, they are still slightly alert or slightly moving, right? And it's not a grand thing. It's mostly just a tiny little thing that we trick ourselves into thinking what good rest is, but we're not resting at all. We're just not. I'll remind them of when the four of us went up into the mountains where none of our damn screens worked, right?
Yep.
Nothing worked. I couldn't call on the phone if I wanted to. But we got some really good rest.
Yep.
Because we were constantly we were either in the pools or we were hanging out and just talking, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't have a choice. You really feel the difference, if you go to a place that doesn't have cell service or anything, you'll learn quickly. And our hotels didn't have TVs, radios, anything. They just had an alarm clock in there, right? So, and although, and I know you felt this way too, when we first checked into the hotel and I got in the room, I was like, oh man, what is this? This is backwoods, dude. There's not even a refrigerator in here or a TV or anything. But it was exactly what I needed. It was exactly what I needed, right?
Yeah. And I'll say, man, every time I go there, it's you get that restlessness pretty quick because all of a sudden you can't get on the Instagrams. You can't go look up random articles. You are now all of a sudden yourself and your thoughts. And I mean, it's great when you have people there, but even then it's just this weird disconnection. You don't realize how much you use something till it's gone.
Well, and the other thing too is we've been so conditioned to be able to check in with people, for example, when I was a kid, if my parents didn't see me for 8 hours, they just had to wonder where I was. It wasn't like they could text me or call me. So that's something too. Like when we go up there, my dog's back at home, my mom's back at home, and my kids back at home, and I have no way to check on them. So then I start getting anxious because what the hell can happen in 3 days? Anything can happen, man. But I forgot there was a time where we didn't know that, where sometimes to talk to somebody you had to write them a letter, right?
Right. Well,
So
it's just man, I could do a whole conversation on this, on
well,
how
it just seems
that
like
type of
it just seems like we've
accessibility.
manufactured stress so badly now, right? If I think back to times where it was a little harder to communicate with people, I don't remember being as stressed out.
Yeah.
But now it seems like stress comes by the bucket full, and it comes from places I can't even recognize or I can't even pinpoint. Right? It just feels that way. Maybe it's not true. Maybe I'm just blowing smoke, but it seems like that to me.
One of my big theories with human nature is that comfort is the worst thing we can have for our mental health. The more comfortable life gets, the more mental health problems develop. You know, it's like, look at social media. We have now access to everyone in our lives, and now we don't socialize. We isolate because we feel connected, but we're so disconnected. That's just
Yeah.
one small example, but I think the more comfort is introduced in our lives, the more unnatural it is for our minds to process it, because we have the same brains as our ancestors 1,000 years ago. Didn't have any of this crap.
Right. Well, that segues us perfect into the next segment because in the next segment, you make a very pointed statement. You cannot deepen consciousness with fragmented attention.
Yeah.
Right? You stand on that? You cannot?
Yeah. No, definitely not. I mean, the more we are fragmented, the less we can end up spending time with the hard things in our lives, whether that's self observation or emotional processing. We start becoming very superficial in our lives. And again, this is something we all go through. Consciousness is not, I reached this level, now I'm staying here. It is something we can just fluctuate between. But that's why it's so important to be mindful of digital overload, is because it'll remove us from the healing work we're doing. And it'll make it so much more difficult because, let's face it, depth decreases.
Yeah. And wouldn't you say that digital overload kind of keeps us stuck in level one, consciousness level one?
Once we start getting into the pattern of it, like, yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. Life is happening to me.
You know?
You're constantly being told what's going on all the time.
Well said. Yes.
Right.
100%. Because it's true. I mean, you got things telling you about what's going on in the world and how horrible it is. Puppies. And it's just,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
you're releasing control to an algorithm to tell you how to feel instead of allowing yourself to feel the way you want to feel, to be who you want to be. I mean, they have so much research that shows how not only algorithms trigger our emotions, but algorithms can change our perspectives. They can dictate what they feed you. They feed you to direct you into a certain belief system.
Right. Right. Yes, that's perfect because I was just about to say, in many ways, for many of us, algorithm replaces our conversations with the universe, our conversations with God, or with gods, or goddesses.
Preach it.
Whatever.
Preach it.
Right? Right? You always notice. Oh, and by the way, it tells us how to vote, who to vote for, what to be pissed off about. Right? I'm constantly seeing, and especially about a year and a half to 2 years before every presidential election in our country, the United States, boy, that algorithm really turns it up, doesn't it? And now all of a sudden, people are pissed off about things that they weren't pissed off about 2 months before that.
Yep.
Because it just knows how to pull us around like puppets.
Well, it's like, man, one thing that's blowing my mind with that is like, there's so much rage culture out there for things that have been happening for years now, and it wasn't a deal. No one cared. Right. And now all of a sudden, it's the end of the world, and it's like, where is this coming from? I see the perspective and why the rage is there, but at the same time, it's like, what's the real agenda here?
Well, yeah, exactly. It almost feels like these things that we are pulled apart from each other about are almost like bullets in a chamber, right? We're going to save this bullet for later because we've already got a good enough reaction to this thing. Let's just hold on to it, and then when stuff starts to calm down, everybody starts to kind of kumbaya a little bit, fire the next shot, right? And then now we're pissed off at each other again.
And again, the algorithms are made to do this. I love to listen to unbiased news. I have a couple channels that I listen to when I want to get updated. and they're great. They bring up really good points. It's a very neutral, grounded thing because that's what I want. I want to know facts, cause and effect. I don't want to know about the emotions.
Right.
But they will bring up a topic that I will then look up to find more information on, and all of a sudden my algorithm is feeding me all these rage bait videos, and it's like, this is not what I want. This is
Right.
not what I'm looking for, and it's so infuriating.
Right. And then when you're the kind of person that tries to overcompensate for that, then you actually start getting into a point where you don't care, right?
Yep.
And you become very dead to the plight of the world or the plight of people when we should not be dead to that. We should be paying attention to that stuff. But
When again, we're not.
They're constantly pulling us left and right, up and down, stretching us out like Gumby, right?
Yeah.
For
Well,
those of
and
you who
again,
don't
we're
know
not
Gumby,
meant to.
look it up.
Well, we're not meant to process so much stuff in the world. One of the biggest reasons I think people struggle so much is like, we're not supposed to know about things going on in separate parts of the world. We are meant to know what's going on in our tribe. That is what we're wired to be able to handle. And when we start getting so much information from far outside of things that even affect us, and we start seeing atrocities, it's parts of us that are meant to be reserved for when those atrocities are home. And when we get numb to it, it becomes so damaging to a collective experience.
So how do we start? What are some things we could do to start rebuilding that depth and that rest and that recovery and that stillness? All these things that we've been talking about. How do we start to rebuild that? What are some easy things we can do? Some simple things.
You know, one of the biggest things I'll say is I'm not going to tell you to delete all your social media. I know I talk about doing that all the time. I have practiced that enough that it's good. And even now, like I said, I'm doing this video because I realize I've gotten bad. So if you have an iPhone, screen time. It is an amazing feature that everyone's phone has where you can put restrictions on how much time you spend on these apps.
Yeah.
So put that on there. Give your phone to your partner or to someone you trust. Have them put in a passcode so you can't bypass it, and allow yourself to start putting measurable restrictions in place so you can start cultivating more stillness in your life. Because chances are, if you just delete the apps, you're going to re-download them. Addiction is a thing, and addiction isn't just drugs. This is just as much of an addiction as fucking heroin is. So start small, make it manageable. Do things that you can build self-trust on and not try to change this overnight. That's my biggest piece of advice I want to bring up right now.
Yeah. Yeah, this is not about a rejection of technology. Technology is a tool, and these tools are meant to serve us as humans.
Yeah.
The goal here is to recalibrate, to realign with what's good for us, right? Because technology, it does amazing things for us in so many parts of our life. But what we're trying to do is remember that these things can be taken to extremes. So
moderation is key.
Yes, the goal here is recalibration. So we're gonna share a few things that work for us, and that hopefully will work for you too. So let's start with cutting down on that multitasking, Michael. Let's learn to train ourselves to do single things at a time.
Yeah. You know, again, one of my favorite acronyms, focus. Follow one course until success. All right, pick something that you've been avoiding, or maybe something not that big. Just start with something that has an end that you can feasibly manifest in your mind. And see it through until you're done. Don't do anything else while doing that. I mean, if you got children or whatever, you got obligations going on around you, priorities, but try to follow one course until you succeed. And just do one a day. Make it simple. And make it what is manageable for you.
And don't do it urgently. Don't worry about speed, right? You're done when you're done. You're done when you're done. Let that quote unquote perfect timing happen when you're done. Don't get stressed out about trying to be quick. Yes, we all have tons and tons and tons of stuff waiting for us to do. But if we learn to tackle one thing at a time, right? That also helps us train to be better exposed to boredom, which is another one, right?
Yeah.
Set aside 10 minutes where you sit without any kind of input other than what your ears hear and what your eyes see. No music, no phone, No conversation, no stimulation. Just simply sit and allow whatever
And no
arises.
music.
And no music. No, no, because I mean, music just becomes background noise. You know, I was thinking about this one day, and one just the other day actually. Um, right now, I'm working some overnights, right, middle of the night, and I'm outside, and I forgot how beautiful and how awestruck I was by just the noise of outside where nothing's happening, because music just plays like such a bad in the background all the time. You know, where you're just listening just so you can hear noise. But I'll drive around, I'll move around for hours at a time now, where I'm not listening to no Coast to Coast AM, man, which I love that show. No music from Spotify. No, just whatever noise the stars in the sky is making, right? And I forgot how awesome that was. So boredom exposure. That's learning to sit with boredom. I think is another important one.
I completely agree. You know, another thing, and this is something I'm really big on. Do a notification audit. I have 1/20th of the apps on my phone I allow to give me notifications because it instantly draws me in. Like Facebook, YouTube, I make sure those do not send me any notifications. I let Messenger do it because I got to get in touch with this guy. But I
Mm-hmm.
make sure that I don't have anything that's going to suck me into those black holes.
Right.
I
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
be
Me
able to
too.
choose consciously when I engage with those.
The people who I love and who I have in my life, whatever means of communication I have with them, that's the only thing that gives me notifications. That's it. You know, I don't even, I don't do Facebook notifications anymore, any of the social medias, even though it's important for us, you know, for this show, for us to look at that stuff. I just set aside some time to do that. I set aside, 30 minutes to do that or whatever.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, it's really important not to be constantly. And like in the middle of the night or when I'm sleeping, my phone is in do not disturb. I don't get any notifications because I want to make sure that I'm not getting this blinking light over here or the little sound of the vibration on the table or a
Yeah.
ring or whatever. So if somebody needs me in the middle of the night, you better send your ghost over here and wake me up because I am not going to see or hear anything on my phone. Just not because I can't sleep. It's just right.
Yeah. You know, another big one is like if you're someone who's stuck in shorts, and Instagram and TikTok are your vices, start getting into long form content, whether that's reading an article, listening to a podcast. You know, I think one of the healthiest things anyone could do is start picking up a book and reading a chapter a day. And it
Yeah.
can be excruciating when you're used to that.
Here's a good one. Here's a camera. Here's a good one to start with.
That's a great one to start with.
Was That was a shameless plug.
That was a beautiful plug. I don't know what you're talking about. You need to talk about that book more often. I
We
don't
will
think you've
be.
brought that. I think you've brought that book up maybe 2 times on this podcast, and both times was just to say that you wrote a book.
Yeah, yeah. Oh no, we will be. Not on this show, but there'll be more things to come later. Yeah, but yeah. I loved that you put this in here because if you're not careful, you'll be like me, where I used to love watching YouTube or listening to YouTube. I don't watch the videos as much as I listen to what's
Yeah,
happening,
same
right?
here.
Because usually I choose YouTube videos that are a lecture or somebody reading out of a book or talking about it, talking about a topic that I'm really interested in. But if I'm and I find myself and the worst thing YouTube ever did was let us watch shorts on the TV. Right? YouTube on the TV was cool because then I can stop paying for cable and I can just watch the stuff that I'm really interested in
Yep.
instead of all the crap that's not useful to me. But they allow shorts, and so you sit down and you're eating dinner or you're kind of getting some couch time in, right? But now you
Yeah.
can use your TV to do shorts, and I'll have to purposely go out of my way sometimes to click a video that's an hour long because and I know it's time for me to do that because I will when I start looking through the suggested videos on stuff that I love to hear about or talk about or whatever, I will start looking for the shortest possible one, right? And that's when I know, man, no. Because if 45 minutes is too long to listen to something that I enjoy, but 20 minutes, I can fit in 20 minutes here and watch it a shorter video. Or if I find it in a short and then I can just try to scroll and find more like that, I know it's time. I know it's time to dive into something that sounds uncomfortable, like an hour-long video. Or like this show's going to end up being, an hour and 20 minutes or something. But if I start to fall into that short trap, look, back in the day, a short video used to be 15, 20 minutes. That's what we would call a short video back in the day, right? That'd be like,
Yep.
oh, that's a short form YouTube. Now it's 38 seconds.
Yeah. That's actually a long short.
That's a long one. Yeah, and look, by the time you're done scrolling, 6 hours later, you just watched 6 hours of tiny little bits of content instead of just watching that 2-hour video, right? So, yeah. And then there's the tech sunset. That's something that I talked about a little bit earlier, Give yourself some space in between screen time and sleep time.
Yeah. It's important, 30 minutes to an hour is all you need, and watch your sleep improve dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
If you're on the fence that this is something that's hitting you, some important questions you can ask yourself is, do I feel scattered or numb? When do I reach for more stimulation the most? Like, what's going on in my life during those times where when I'm reaching for that phone, for that algorithm? What discomfort am I avoiding? Ask yourself that. Because often there is something deeper that you're trying to just push to the side so you don't have to think about it.
Right.
And you can ask yourself, how can you bring more depth to your life this week if you had screens on less? Do you got any final thoughts before I jump into affirmations?
I do. We hear a lot about, because of this, and I'm going to sound like I don't know what I'm going to sound like, but we always hear about digital overload being some kind of like productivity problem, right?
Yeah.
These damn kids aren't working very well because they got the damn phones plugged to them. It's not for us. We don't care about that. For us, it's a consciousness problem, because when your attention is constantly pulled in 100 different directions, you never have a chance to stabilize your awareness, because everything starts to become reactive, and everything like your body and your mind stays activated, even if just a little bit. And as you said, the depth of things disappears. And this has nothing to do with your intelligence. It has nothing to do with your desire to grow and heal. It's because the conditions required for true consciousness, true awareness are missing. Attention is that gateway to awareness. And we're trying to expand our awareness and expand our consciousness here. Where your attention goes, your identity will follow, and everything else will follow. So, and when that attention is fragmented, everything about you is fragmented over time. But the opposite is also true. When attention begins to stabilize, what happens? Our awareness expands, it deepens. When the stimulation decreases, we start to learn better and remember how to settle down and be still, right?
Yeah.
So, and when the mind learns to stay with one experience at a time, and then we have those spaces in between where we can actually reflect and return and understand it, right? Everything else starts to fall into alignment. So this week, choose one small shift. And we're gonna have an exercise here in a minute, but just give yourself 5 minutes, 10 minutes to just sit with yourself. This is why we always talk about meditation. And meditation is not a perfect practice. You don't have to practice it perfectly to get benefit from it. Just sit for 10 minutes and don't allow yourself to do anything else. Just sit with yourself. Maybe it's reading something like you talked about what'd you call it? The long form diet?
Long form content. Yeah, long form diet.
I love that. The long form diet. I love that because it's true. Allow yourself to read 10 pages or a chapter, but read it intentionally. Read it in a way that you're actually going to absorb what's being said. So,
and even if you don't absorb it at first, it's all about practice. I struggled with reading comprehension I was diagnosed dyslexic. I didn't read a book until I was 24. And man, the first couple of times I tried, it was a struggle. But the more I practiced, the more it started being able, my brain started engaging with the content.
This realignment, this recalibration, if you will, it happens through these small, consistent changes in how and where you place your attention. So if this episode helped you see your habits differently or find some room for improvement, and you know someone who might also be struggling with this, share this episode. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. Encourage them to subscribe, because this is the stuff we're talking about this season, and this is stuff we're going to start working through. But just remember, stillness is not emptiness. Stillness is where we have the ability to practice our awareness. And that's what I got for you today.
Beautiful. For affirmations today, my attention is valuable, and I choose where it goes. Stillness strengthens my awareness. I can tolerate boredom without escaping it. Depth requires focus, and I am capable of focus. I do not need constant stimulation to feel alive. For our journaling prompt today, track your attention for one day. When do you switch tasks? How often do you check your phone without intention? What emotion usually precedes the impulse to scroll? Then write down, if I protected my attention more, what would change about my inner world? And then for our practice today, it's a simple one. For the next 48 hours, choose one app in your phone that's a high frequency app, something you're using constantly. Choose 2 time frames in which you're going to utilize it, and only spend 10 minutes, and scratch all of that. Remove 1 high frequency app from your home screen. Choose 2 fixed windows for when you're going to consume content on that app. Make sure that the time is dedicated. I'm going to spend 30 minutes from 4:30 to 5 and from 7 to 7:30, whatever times you choose. But make sure it's fixed. Set an alarm, a timer, whatever you need to. And choose 10 minutes to sit in silence each day. And when you do, notice, does restlessness increase at first? Does clarity improve as you go through this process each day? And does emotional numbness shift? Do you start to feel more of what you've been holding back? Do you start to feel more aware in the world? Mm-hmm. Again, like Justin said, if this episode resonated with you, please like, subscribe. If you think this could benefit someone you know, share it. And if you enjoy this content we're creating, join us on the path to Ashla. This is something we're putting out twice a week for you guys because we want to help people find their way back home to themselves, to find their place in the world. With love and gratitude, ad lucem.
Ad lucem.